why is supply chain important? And I think the question is almost redundant for anyone that's living in the UK, which I don't anymore. But apparently, they've got cardboard cutout pictures of vegetables in Tesco's. We're looking as people that have to exist in this economy at spiraling inflation, which seems to be driven by the supply chain. Our lives are dependent on the supply chain with vaccines shortages and PPEs. The whole state of the world is really being driven by supply chains. You look at the what China is doing in order to secure its supply chains, and historically Suez crises, things like that are being driven by supply chain. We have climate change being, I think, our way out of the climate change crisis is actually driven by efficiencies that we can gain in supply chain technology. And then you look just at our day-to-day lives, and the giants that are successful are really successful because they've mastered supply chain. You look at Tesla, Apple, further back Dell, their positions are driven by supply chain. And then you come back to, well, how do I become successful in the supply chain? And I think part of it is technology. So that's why we're talking to you. And I don't know whether you have anything to add or disagree with my little monologue on supply chain, but what are your thoughts?
Well, first, nothing to disagree. We're at this kind of weird, I guess it's like everything in life right now, at this kind of really weird point. A year ago, November, I was writing my column for the November issue of Supply Chain Management Review, November 2020. Mm-hmm. And we were hearing things about the vaccines coming and distribution was going to start to roll out. And it seemed like a pretty optimistic time. And, after all of the supply chain failures that happened in the spring when everything shut down, right? And I wrote this line saying, after all the chaos and whatever, it's supply chain's time to shine, or hopefully I wrote it better than I just explained it. So I always review my prior year's column before I write my new problem. I was like, I don't know, I could just take that and change the date because we were still in all the chaos and the upheaval, and hopefully, 2022 will be supply chain's time to shine. Another sort of weird data point, and I'm sure somebody out there is smarter than me when it comes to economics and finance and things will write in or call in to say why I just am completely missing the boat. But a couple of weekends ago, I was reading the Saturday Wall Street Journal, and I started. It was during earnings report season, right? Everybody was reporting their earnings, and we actually just came off a very good earnings report season. So there was an article on Chipotle. And the first half of the article said Chipotle doesn't have enough workers, so they're having to close stores, and they can't, do their normal operating hours, and it's costing them sales. Wages are going through the roof. Their raw materials and supplies are going through the roof. So if you only read those two paragraphs, you thought, oh, terrible, horrible time. And certainly yesterday, I went to the movies last night and went by the local Kentucky Fried Chicken and Taco Bell at 5:00 on a Sunday with football games going on, right? Mm-hmm. And normally there's cars lined up at Kentucky Fried Chicken. They were closed, and they had a sign in the window that they didn't have enough help. So at 5:00 on a Sunday, dinner time on football Sunday, Kentucky Fried Chicken was closed. You read the second half of the Chipotle earnings, and it turns out that their profit margins have never been better, that despite all the closings, they had record sales, and their stock has doubled in 2021 to $1,800 a share, which means it was $900 a share at the end of 2020. And And I know that it was in the mid 400s in like 2017, 2018. So in a matter of, 3 or 4 years, their stock has quadrupled. So, to quote Charles Dickens, since you're a Brit, is it the best of times or the worst, or the worst of times or the best of times? I'm going to reverse it, right? And I read down, and there's CSX Railroad's earnings report. Same thing, top two paragraphs. Their auto business is tanking because the automakers can't make cars, so they're not shipping cars. Oh, that's terrible. They can't hire enough engineers, so they're having to, not run all the routes that they want to run. Wages are going through the roof. It's the worst of times. Mm-hmm. It's right before the guillotine comes down at the end of, The Tale of Two Cities. And then you read below and it says, oh, meanwhile, by the way, our intermodal business has gone through the roof. It would be even better if we had more chassis. It's so good that we're telling commodity producers that we don't want to haul their stuff. Oh, and we just reported record earnings. So you have this interesting dichotomy out there that on the one hand, businesses are really struggling around supply chain issues. On the other hand, they've been 2 points better. Okay, but 5.8% is considered like a raging economy, right?
Yes.
Two points
Yes.
better is sure, but 2 points better isn't sustainable. You'd really have inflation going through the roof if we were at nearly 8% GDP. Unemployment's at 4.6%. So not to minimize, people out of work and all of those things, but if you look at the raw numbers, any administration would be thrilled with those numbers. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Just to interrupt, so I guess the takeaway is that there's overall things could be a lot worse.
Yes.
There's some winners, there's some losers, and your mastery of supply chain, and I would say the technology that enables it is a key factor. I want to get into some of these questions that we had lined up, but before we get into it, and people can go to other places to get this summary, but what's your take on why is it that the bad things that are happening? We have ships that are still sitting outside of the docks in LA, and even though the chip companies are doing great, there's a whole bunch of other companies that can't get the chips they need for their products. They're doing terrible. How did we end up in the mess, to the extent that it is a mess? How did we end up in it?
So two quick takeaways. Yossi Sheffi from MIT, I interviewed Yossi one day and he said, people say supply chains failed. They didn't. They operated exactly as they were designed to operate. They were designed to operate just in time and with lean inventories. They weren't designed to operate in global, tumult and turmoil and a global shutdown and then startup. So he was saying we need to rethink the design of supply chains. I interviewed the chief supply chain officer for a medical supplies company who said to me, none of these issues are new. By the way, the labor shortage in warehouses and factories is 15 years old. I gave presentations on it 8 years ago. So none of it is new. The way he put it is all of these things were problems before. COVID just made all the things that were bad even worse. So I think there's part of that. And I think it really is a perfect storm in that, like in 2008, we shut down. The shutdown was even bigger than the financial crisis, but we shut down because everybody just hunkered down and was going to, protect their own. The comeback was faster than 2008, number one. And, the pent-up demand was greater than the comeback in 2010 after the 2008 crisis. So I think you had people hunkered down even more, and then the rebound was more than anybody ever anticipated. So people didn't have supplies, they didn't have that. And then you throw in a whole bunch of things that might have happened. Maybe one of them might have happened or two of them might have happened, but you had the Suez Canal, ICE had a major chip factory burned to the ground. You've had all sorts of weather interventions in addition to the Texas thing. With I live in New England, we had record flooding, this summer. So you've had all of those things. And then you've had this thing that I still don't know what quite to make of it, but the resignation. Like, my little town in New Hampshire is kind of microcosm in that New Hampshire has always had low unemployment. Like New Hampshire typically is between 2 and 3% unemployment. So it's pretty low. There were help wanted signs everywhere in my little town pre-COVID, but you didn't have Kentucky Fried Chicken having to close, on a Friday or on a Sunday afternoon. I don't understand where, and the population didn't suddenly grow during COVID. We've been 20,000 people since I moved here in 1984. So it's not like there's a whole lot more mouths to feed or a whole lot more people buying whatever it is. It's the same population. So how, and I think that's true most everywhere. So how we went from a tight labor market to I just can't get anybody no matter what I pay them, to the life of me, I don't understand. But it seems like all of those things happened at once, along with just an incredible spike in pent-up demand.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Mr. Beacon podcast here on YouTube. You can listen to the rest of this episode on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed it, please like and share this video, and be sure to subscribe for more weekly videos. For more information about Wiliot and IoT Pixels, head on over to wiliot.com.